Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Nice to see you today again. Hi, Katrina. People are waving. Hello, Ostijas. Did I say that right? Okay. Kind of exercise or reminder for when you wake up, to do that as a practice. Yes, you can think about perfect human rebirth, but you can also think about, what am I grateful for today? What is helping me what is supporting me to achieve my goals, whatever these goals are, and when you write it down, it really helps to lift up your spirit. So if you forgot, tomorrow you have a new chance. And if I remember, I will remind you after the last session. And then we can also think about, our body is impermanent. So how lucky we are that we did wake up this morning, right? So many people who didn't wake up, they went to sleep with the same thought as we. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to do this and this and this, and they don't wake up. They die in the middle of the night. So how lucky we are that we didn't, that death hasn't come yet, that we have another day of this life that we can use in order to develop our potential for loving kindness, for compassion, for understanding the nature of reality. How lucky we are. So I see that many people, they jump in the last minute. So I do a little introduction to get you all here. And then we can start with a short meditation just to focus the mind, to calm the mind, to bring the mind to a place where we can so much better receive the teachings, because what we're talking about goes beyond what keeps us busy in daily life. So we need to prepare the mind to receive that, to even have the possibility to receive that. So we just do a couple of minutes where you close your eyes. And maybe you want to take a few deep breaths. And with every out breath, you let go of whatever has kept you busy. Things do not disappear when we don't think about them. If there is something that needs our attention, it will be there after the session. We do not need to think about that at this moment. And if there is something in your mind that keeps popping up because it is important that you remember that after the session, I suggest that you write it down so that you do not have to think about it during the session. This time is a special time to reconnect with your own essence. Where you can be in a place where you do not need to do anything. Where you can be just present. And that's good enough. And then set up a good motivation for participating in this session. Remind yourself why you're doing this. And whatever your motivation is for participating in these sessions, whether that is, I want to be more happy, I want to be more of benefit, I want to learn how to develop my potential for wisdom and compassion. Whatever motivation you have, if you visualize yourself that you become what you would like to become, and then see how that would influence everyone around you. I'm sure whatever your motivation you have is going to benefit all these beings around you. If you become a better human being, fit more sentient beings. Motivation you have, you do that for yourself, but be aware that at the same time, you also going to benefit so many others. And that can be part of your motivation too. And I'll do a little recap of what we have been doing in the last few days, just as a reminder. You know, it's when we trigger the memories from the last few days, I think it becomes a bit more rich. So the first day we looked into compassion. What is compassion? Why do we want to develop compassion? And why is it important today in this world? So we spoke about the benefits of compassion and how we can practice it in both a secular way or as part of a spiritual practice. And so because I'm teaching Buddhist philosophy, the way I teach it is as being part of spiritual practice, and in particular being part of Mahayana Buddhism, which means Buddhism that is strives for developing our full compassion in order to be of greatest benefit to all sentient beings. Compassion for others is based on compassion for oneself, because whatever relationship we have with others is based on how we relate to ourselves. So we're not sure yet what self-compassion is. We easily confuse it with self-centeredness, self-pity, or self-esteem. And there was a question about that yesterday, and tomorrow I will help to clarify better, because I think we need more information before we can really distinguish the difference between self-compassion and self-pity, self-centeredness, self-esteem, you know. So today I want to give you that extra bit of information that we need, and then tomorrow we can clear that up. So yesterday we started with a discussion, discussing the foundations that we need for developing a compassionate mind. And we talked about precious human rebirth. And by realizing how rare and precious it is, we can appreciate it and feel gratitude for it. And then because of that, we can say, I want to use this for the greatest benefit. And then after that, we spoke about impermanence and death and our tendency to deny that, and how we grasp at false securities. And with this, by doing this, our mind becomes self-centered, more concerned with oneself. And I hope that you got a little bit of taste that when we start accepting death and impermanence, and by learning how to be with the ever-changing nature of reality, that our mind can relax and can open up more. You know, it is very strange. We think it is very scary. And because we think it is very scary, it makes us tense and we don't want to know about it. But once we start to connect with it, we can feel, oh, this is just nature. This is just how things are. And if I connect with it, it actually makes me feel really good and relaxed. Right? So it is not nature itself that is scary, but it is the way that we think about it that makes that we react as if it's scary. That is our projection of the mind. We believe it is something that we have to hide from. But once we start to connect with it, it is actually who we are. It's our true essence. It's extremely beautiful. So I hope you got a little bit of a taste of that and a little bit more courage to start connecting with that and start investigating that. And I taught only a little bit, you know, whatever I'm teaching, if you look into Buddhism, you find huge amount of material. And I think also if you go online and see what teachings are available on death, on how to die, on, you know, there is a huge wealth of teachings related to that. So I just want to help you to think, oh, I can go there, you know, maybe there is something in for me. And I think the more we do that, the more we become real, the more we become connected to reality, the deeper our compassion will become, because we understand life, right? And if we want to talk about freedom of suffering and having the wish for others to be free from suffering, having the wish for ourselves to be free of suffering, we need to connect deeply with reality as it is. From there, compassion arises. From there, understanding arises. So today we'll continue with laying that healthy foundation for developing compassion. And we're going to talk about karma, which I couldn't finish yesterday, and about cyclic existence, about, you know, yesterday I mentioned we take rebirth according to Buddhism again and again and again. So why is it that we take rebirth, and how do we take rebirth? And it depends upon which kind of causes and conditions. We're gonna start there. So having reflected on death and impermanence, according to Buddhism, it says, then the thought comes, what comes after? And so in that context, I'm going to talk a little bit about karma, the law of cause and effect. Karma means intention. It is the intention with which we engage in actions. Actions of body, actions of speech, and actions of mind. So every thought I have, all the thinking that we're doing, all the things that I'm saying, all the actions that I engage in, they all have an intention. I'm not aware of most of my intentions. I just work on an automatic pilot, and I'm going to assume that you do the same. And that's not necessarily a virtuous thing, you know. We might bring more, if we can bring more awareness to our intention, we become a little bit more in control. And I'll explain you why that is. So it is the intention with which we engage in actions. And then each action leaves an imprint in the mind. And at some point in the future, that can be in this life, that can be in the next life, or it can be in another next life. When causes and conditions come together, that imprint will ripen into an experience. Experience means into a feeling. So feelings that arise are the results of actions that we have done in the past. And this is very important to remember. Feelings that arise are the result of actions that we have done in the past. So that you like particular things very much, that certain things trigger the pleasurable feelings in your mind. That feeling comes from past actions. It is the result of past actions. If you have unpleasant feelings arising, whether that is in a certain in a certain event or in relation to certain objects, that is a result of past actions. And if we look into the world, there are people that experience with whatever they're doing, they're happy as a result of previous actions. And then there are people, they go through the similar experiences, but they feel unhappy. They go through similar events, I should say, and they feel unhappy. That comes due to their past action. So whatever we're feeling is not coming from the objects that we contact with. Whatever we connect with, independence on that feelings arise. That whatever we connect with is a condition for certain feelings to ripen, for certain karma to ripen, and certain feelings to arise in the mind. But that object is not the cause of our feeling. If you love chocolate, you think that you're going to feel happy when you eat chocolate. But the happiness doesn't come from the chocolate. The happiness comes from your own positive karma. And the chocolate is a condition for that karma to ripen. So remember that one, it's very important. And then we say that karma can ripen in 4 ways. And I'm gonna put you that up on the screen so that you can see what I'm talking about. Sometimes that is handier, no? Here it is. So karma can ripen in 4 ways. The first way is that what we call fruitional result, and that refers to the type of rebirth that we take. The second one is the experience similar to the cause, which means if I have punched someone at a certain point in time, then at another point of time, someone will come and punch me back. Right? So what I've given out comes back to me in the same way. That is called experience similar to the cause. You know, and I think in Christianity we have sayings like, what you put out, you will get back. So then the third way that karma can ripen, and if you want, I can put this in the Dropbox or in the Google Drive folder, so you don't have to write it necessarily down if you don't want to. Experience similar to the action, which means if I, in order to get something or to get away from something, act in a certain way, you know, and I'm successful, then the chance that I repeat that behavior becomes bigger, right? Because I've learned, oh, that brings me success. I'll do this again, and I'll do this again. So experience similar to the action means that we do an action, and then because we are successful, we repeat that action. And then when we repeat that action more often, that becomes a habit in our mind. And when it becomes a habit, and we keep repeating it, at a certain point, we believe that things are really like that. So the habit becomes a belief. And it becomes part of who we are. It becomes part of our personality. So in Buddhism, we say these habits, which is the karma that is the experience similar to the action, that is very, very difficult to remove because it can be so deep-seated and we can so strongly believe that that is what we need to do. And so we keep repeating the same thing, believing that that is going to bring us happiness and that that is going to bring us freedom from suffering. And so that's the, and then we have the environmental result. So that is how we experience our environment. It can refer to the environment itself. For instance, you know, you live in a very beautiful area, which is very clean and everything is available. Food is available, medicines are available. That is a result of your, what we say, positive karma. Or you can also live in a very ugly, stinky place, you know, where it's uncomfortable, the weather is not good, the food that you eat is not good. That is a result of negative karma. So it refers to the outer appearances of our environment, but it also refers to how we experience that environment. We can be in the same environment with somebody and we feel perfectly happy and the other person feels very miserable, right? And they blame everything onto the environment. Oh, I don't like it here and it's cold and it's wet and it's damp and oh, there are all these creatures walking around. And another person is in exactly the same environment and says, I'm perfectly happy here, right? So it is not just the outer environment, it is mainly referring to how do you experience your environment. In general, we say, you know, when the environment is very beautiful, people are, in general, more inclined to be happy. And when things are dirty and very unpleasant in one way or the other, then many people experience that as unpleasant, but not necessarily, right? So this is about what we experience. So you have all this. I'll go back to the screen. Yeah. So if we look into what we experience in life, and if we look into our habits and our environment, we can understand what we have done in the past. Right? If something happens to you again and again and again, then you can be sure that maybe you have a habit in which you're doing the same to others, but you're not aware of it. Maybe you have done it in the past and it is coming back to you in the form of these experiences. So you need to investigate that. You know, you look into your life, and we're going to do that with the journaling in a little while. I want to give you a little bit more information on karma. But you look into your life, what is coming to me, you know, and then say, I must have done that myself. And then see if you can find, so first of all, you must have done that. You must have done that action. But do you also have the habit? And so then you look into your mind and see if you can find the habit. And then you look in your environment and think, what does that say about my karma? So when we see that we have created or must have created negative actions, then what we do in Buddhism, we have a method to purify the negativities, because we all have a lot of negative imprints in our mind because we all have engaged in all the negative actions that you can imagine. But once we can see, hey, that is harming others. Hey, that is actually also harming myself. Once you can see that, you can do something about that. So first you need to acknowledge that you have the seeds of, and maybe the habit of these negative actions in your mind. And then, in dependence upon that acknowledgement, you develop strong regret. You say, I must have done that. I must have caused this kind of suffering to others. I'm so sorry. Not just because I harmed that other person, but also because that is going to become an obstacle for me to develop the mind of loving kindness and compassion. That is going to become an obstacle for me to develop my wisdom, because that is how karma works. And so then you have regret like that, and then you make the determination, I do not going to engage in that negative action again. And if it is a strong habit, you might say, I'm not going to engage in that negative action again for the next 5 minutes or the next 10 minutes. And then you try to make that period longer and longer. So what kind of actions create suffering? So, we can, if things come back to us, then what kind of actions create suffering? That means actions that have been harmful. And in Buddhism, we call that the 10 non-virtuous actions. Non-virtuous actions are sometimes called negative actions or bad actions. But the reason why they are called like that is because the result of the actions is suffering. If you have a Christian upbringing and maybe also another religious upbringing, then bad and negative can come with a certain feeling of guilt, a certain feeling of I'm doing something wrong. It can come with the feeling of there is an authority that says this is bad and this is good. Right? In Buddhism, nothing like that exists. Bad, non-virtuous, negative means this is going to cause suffering for you in the future. And if you are serious about becoming enlightened, if you are serious about becoming perfectly happy, if you are serious about developing compassion and compassion for others, these actions are obstacles, because when there is a lot of suffering in your life, you cannot practice. Right? So it is not that anyone says this is good or bad. It is good or bad because it is going to become an obstacle for you. So there is no judgment in good and bad. But it is good and bad means you do not have the conditions that you would like to have in order to achieve your goals. Do you get that? I have to keep reminding myself, no, not so much anymore, but coming from a Catholic background, the good and the bad were very strong, programmed in my mind. And at a certain point, you do that with yourself, you judge yourself, oh, this is good and this is bad. And when you come from the mind of judgment, you divide the world into two parts. There is a good part and there is a bad part. That division, of course, from one level, yes, there is that division, because there are things that are going to be helpful for you and there are things that are not going to be helpful for you. But that is not coming from a mind that is judging, that wants to suppress, that wants to be in control in an unhealthy manner. So good and bad is about being good and bad for you. Creating conditions that are good for you. So what kinds of actions create suffering? So we call them the 10 non-virtuous actions. And so we talk about 10 actions, but in actuality, it refers to all the actions, all the negative actions of body, speech, and mind, all the actions that are harmful. These are non-virtuous actions. Negative means harmful. Harmful to you, harmful to others. So the 10 non-virtuous actions are, there are 3 of the body. which are killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. There are 4 of the mind, and if you 4 of the speech, which is lying, harsh speech, divisive speech, and gossip. And there are 3 of the mind, which is covetousness, malice, and wrong view. And if you want to know more detail about what is that exactly, you know, what is stealing, what is sexual, I mean, people are normally only interested in what is sexual misconduct, but it is very good to read any Lamrim book and see what does it mean, killing, what does it mean, stealing, what does it mean, lying, what does it mean? You know, because it is not just a very simple definition, there is a whole description that makes some actions worse, some actions, you know, less harmful. So these are the 10 non-virtues. They create suffering for us. And then we can think about what kind of actions lead to happiness in the future, whether that is in this life or future lives. So these are what we call the virtuous actions. Virtuous actions are actions that abstain from harm, and these are actions that benefit others. So you can see that you have a tendency to lie, you know, to be a little bit flexible with the truth. When the moment that you say, I'm going to stop doing that, that is already a virtuous action. You stopping from engaging in negative action is already virtue. Then you can create more virtue even by benefiting others. For instance, you can save or protect life of other beings. You know, you can practice generosity. You can maintain pure sexual conduct. And in terms of speech, you can talk sincerely, you can talk truthfully and directly, you can make peace between people that hate each other. When you talk calmly, gently, and you talk about meaningful things. If you can develop your speech like that, your words are going to become very powerful. People are going to listen to you. You know, sometimes we have the karma that nobody listens to us, you know, no matter what we say, people don't take us seriously. So Buddhism says that can be a result of gossip. You know, gossip means I talk about meaningless things, you know, blah, 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 about, you know, whatever, the movies, the very little things. And although that is not a great negativity when we do that one time, because we do that a lot, it becomes a very big negativity. And so the result of that is that your speech becomes very weak. And then when you say something, people don't listen. When you want people to listen to you, you need to purify your speech. Silence is a very good way to purify your speech, you know, you just shut up for a while. And I mean, like going into retreat where you keep silence for days, where you don't use your speech, and then you can observe much better your mind and you can purify your mind. And then when you speak, when you come out of retreat and you start speaking, you do not want to talk about meaningless things anymore. You know, it's totally useless. Why would I spend my time like that? Then you become more, you know, you just want to talk about meaningful things. And so in terms of the mind, we can cultivate an open and generous mentality. We can cultivate love and goodwill. You know, when we think about others, we have good thoughts in our mind. When we think about things, material objects, and how can I get that? But we think about, you know, maybe how can I give to others? How can I just stay open for things that come to me instead of always wanting to chase something? And we can also purify or create virtuous actions by the mind, by practicing, by cultivating a correct view and by living in accordance with that. And so for that, we need to study, we need to investigate, we need to analyze, right? What is a correct view? What correct view means a view in accordance with reality. We have many views that are not in accordance with reality. We have many, like with respect to human body, for instance, we assume that this is just natural. We are just human beings, as if we always have been human beings and always will be human beings. We take it for granted, but that is a kind of a wrong view. It's not true. We are not always human beings. We are not always, definitely not this person. And the same with death. Not thinking death is going to come, not thinking about it is kind of not in accordance with reality. And so then we can definitely apply that to karma. That person is just very lucky. Why is that person always so lucky? He seems to be always successful and I'm not. But that is karma. When we understand karma, we understand why things happen the way they happen. And we get more control over our life when we start implementing that. And even if you think like, well, I'm not sure about that, that's fine, but keep reflecting, keep investigating. And at a certain point, when something is true, the thinking will take you to that truth. When we activate the wisdom mind, when something really doesn't exist, when karma really doesn't exist, and you investigate it and deeper and deeper and deeper, you will find that it doesn't exist. But if karma does exist, by investigating deeper and deeper, you will get more confidence that it does function like that. And that will make that you will start applying that in your life. And that will help you to change your life. So don't take it on the basis of blind faith. Oh, Jamyang said karma exists, so I like what you're saying, so I accept that, Because the moment you get into trouble, you throw whatever I told you, you throw it out. Because it's not yours. It's not really, it hasn't sank deep into your mind. For that to happen, you need to think about it. You need to reflect about it. You need to investigate reality, or this, what the teachings say, I'm going to put that onto reality and see if that is really true. And if you see that it matches reality, and if you start accepting reality, your thinking becomes more in line with reality. And that will make you automatically more happy, more relaxed. What makes us unhappy, what makes us stressed, is that wind-up mind, wanting, doing, that are not in accordance with reality. And so even if we try very hard, we're never getting the outcome that we want. That is what causes us the stress. All right, let me see if there are any questions. There are something in the chat. Let me have a look. Can you put these in the chat? Which one would you like in the chat? Same karma can ripen in 4 ways, almost at the same time. Same, well, maybe, I don't know. It can be, that in one lifetime, certain karma ripens in all these 4 ways at the same time. With a lot of experiences that we have in life, to have this human body, one karma has ripened, which is a good karma, which is a karma of a virtuous action, of maybe many virtuous actions have created that cause for this human rebirth. And then within this human rebirth, we have positive actions, and then we have positive experiences and negative experiences. So these negative experiences come from negative karma that we created in the past. They're not coming from the same positive karma as where our body is coming from. So I think, yeah, I'm not sure what to say about that. Which Lamrim book would you suggest for the 10 on virtue? Any Lamrim book. And the bigger, the thicker the Lamrim book, the more extensive the explanations. But even the small ones give you quite good information. Is being sick or poor also karma? Anything is karma. Anything. Everything. Everything what we experience is karma. So there are people who are very poor, but they do not suffer from being poor. So they do not suffer from being poor. So they might even feel very rich, you know. Many poor people are extremely giving. And then you think, how is that possible? They are so giving and then they have no money. How can they be poor when they have the habit of being so generous? You know? So these are the mysterious ways of karma, and they are very difficult to explain. But you know, I think whatever condition we come in, whatever circumstance, is a result of karma. Then how we experience that depends upon our mind. So when you have a sickness, yes, that is a result of negative karma. But then you can use that in order to transform your mind, right? So the result is already there. You cannot do anything about that. But how are you going to use that? How are you going to use that to create your future? Are you going to sit and say, oh, poor me, I'm so sick, and why do I deserve this, and I haven't done anything, and I always have been a good person, and I shouldn't have this, and you know, that is not going to get you anywhere. But if you say, okay, I'm sick, I must have done something that causes sickness, how can I transform this so that I can use it for the benefit of others? And later we will talk about how we can do that. You know? So whatever comes to us, we can use that for a spiritual growth. On what basis does Buddhism believe in rebirth? Okay, I'm going to leave that question for later, because I would like you to do a little bit of journaling. So let me just see, because can you put these in the chat? Yeah, you mean these 4 ways of karma are ripening? Yes, okay. I will put them in the chat while you're doing the journaling, and then you can copy them. All right. So for the journaling, I'm going to ask you to look into the experiences in your life and into your habits and into your environment. And then can you understand what kind of actions you have engaged in the past? And you think about the positive experiences that you have in life and about the negative experiences that you have in life. And so I'll give you 10 minutes and you need to divide yourself. You know, do I spend 3 minutes in 1.5 minutes about experiences, positive experiences, 1.5 minutes about negative experiences, and then I think about my habits, positive, negative. You know, you divide that time. So I'm going to put that in the chat box. To everyone. All right. We do 10 minutes. So try to finish it. Are we ready? Was that insightful to look into your own mind and your own life and say, oh, you know, sometimes we are suffering, but we're not sure what is going on, what makes us suffer. And then if we start checking what kind of events are happening in our life, we might actually be able to understand, oh, this is coming to me, not just one time, but several times. And somehow that creates a lot of suffering in my mind, you know. So that's a result of karma. And then if you know, oh, these actions I've done, you can purify these actions. You can say, I must have done that. And then generate strong regret and make the determination that you will never, ever do that to any living being. You know, and that will, I don't know, I tried that at a certain point and it really changed what was going on in my life. You know, it was like, I must have done that and I will promise never to do that again. And then I did some purification practices and whatever was happening just disappeared. So there are two more questions. So I will put the 10 non-virtuous actions also in the Google Drive folder. So you will find that later today. And then there is a question, what if someone, how did you say that? A horrible crime, the victim of the horrible crime. So I think most people that experience something horrible are actually in that situation totally innocent. Their only problem is that they were there at that moment. And so why were they there at that moment? There were forces at play, you know, karmic forces that makes that you are there at that moment. But it is not that you have done anything in this body, in this life. You know, sometimes it can be, but often these horrible experiences come from different lifetimes. There's a ripening of karma from different lifetimes. So this we need to learn to distinguish. The person in this life is totally innocent. But in a previous moment of time, they must have done something that made that they're there at that moment in time. So we never say, well, it's just your karma, you know, suck it up. As if it is your fault, you know. No, it was not a fault. The person who was there didn't make a fault. They were just there. And so when somebody is suffering, you know, whether there was a reason for them to suffer, that we believe there was a reason or not, we need to look at suffering sentient beings as being innocent in the sense that they deserve our compassion. They deserve to be free of that suffering. Because part of our mind things that if people deserve suffering, they should suffer. That way, that's not compassion. Compassion is, no matter what you have done, I want you to be free of suffering. Is the result of my past karma that I'm privileged to attend this class? I think it is a result of your past karma that you attend this class. So you must have created some causes and conditions to hear the teachings in this form. Seeing it as a privilege is what your mind is doing with that, you know, is and then you want a spiritual, someone who can help you. I can answer to that later. Purification exercises, you would like to know something about that? Let's see if I have some time, maybe tomorrow or day after tomorrow, I'll talk a little bit about that. So the question is, I'll talk about that later, Sumya, okay? I'll finish the teaching for today, and then you have your discussion group, and then I'll use that question to answer that later today. So if we know about karma, and we know that by engaging in virtuous actions, we create the causes to experience happiness, and by engaging in non-virtuous actions, we create the causes of experiencing suffering. With that knowledge, you can check your own behavior, you know, and see if you want to make adjustments to that. So now let's have a look at what happiness is and how we find happiness, and also what suffering is and how we try to be free of suffering. Because we must come to the conclusion that we are doing something wrong, right? Because we want to be happy in a certain way and we haven't found that. And we also want to be free of suffering, but we haven't found how to do that. And so if you understand how come that you haven't found that, from there, the knowledge also arises, how can I do things differently? But you have to understand deeply. Because if you miss certain layers, you know, then you start engaging in actions, but you come again to a point in time that you say, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. If you find a method that is rooted in reality, that is conform reality, the method will work. Right? Because happiness comes from causes and conditions. Suffering comes from causes and conditions. If you know how it works, you can produce it. But if you have not the full knowledge, and especially when your knowledge is opposite to how reality works, then whatever you try is never going to bring you the result that you want. True? Sometimes they say the truth is what sets you free. When you see how things are in actuality, you are free. So if something doesn't work, you haven't seen the truth yet. If something is weird and you don't understand, you haven't seen the truth yet. You have to investigate, you have to study, you have to listen, you have to, you know, whatever is going to help you to get that understanding. So we all want to be happy. That is our instinctive nature. There is nothing wrong with that, you know, because our full potential, if we would develop our full potential, we are perfectly happy. So our search for happiness, sometimes I wonder, you know, our search for happiness is maybe deep inside. We know that we have that potential to be perfectly happy. And so that is what keeps us going. So it is our instinctive nature, and there's nothing wrong with that, and you should never, ever give that up. Studying Buddhism is not about, you know, wanting to suffer or no, we want to be happy. but we want to find the method that is really going to produce that happiness. So how do we find happiness? And what is happiness for us? You know, so when we come in contact with something that produces pleasant feelings in our mind, we like it. What is the next step that we are saying? I want more. So as soon as pleasure arises in the mind, in Buddhism we say that pleasure is immediately followed by attachment. Attachment says, I want more. When displeasure arises in the mind, that is immediately followed with aversion. I do not want that. I want to have less of that, or I want to be free of that. So this is what the mind, how the mind reacts. That is for us, it is an automatic reaction. Pleasure is there, attachment follows straight away. I want that. I want more. Displeasure arises, painful experiences arises. I want to be free of that. So the way we find happiness and freedom from suffering is by following our attachment and by following our aversion. Attachment is what we call a disturbing emotions. Aversion, and everything that comes from aversion, like anger, is a disturbing emotion, which means it disturbs the mind. So the way we find happiness and freedom from suffering, we use attachment and aversion, but they both disturb our mind. While happiness is that we have an undisturbed mind, a peaceful mind. And freedom from suffering has kind of similar meaning. And in order to find that peaceful mind, we use a method that disturbs the mind. Right? There we're doing something that is never going to bring us the result that we want if we keep doing it like that. But we have other possibilities. So we do not, there are other ways that we can be happy, and we can think about happiness in a different way. So let's look what happiness is. For us, happiness is when we experience pleasant feelings. And these feelings, they come and go. And they're straight after, followed by attachment, which disturbs the mind. But in Buddhism, we have two types of happiness. One is the happiness of the pleasant feelings, the one that we already know. But then there is another one, and that is a happiness which is a freedom of the disturbing emotions. So one happiness is going together with the disturbing emotions, which is the pleasure, which we know is not satisfactory by nature. And then there is another happiness, which is freedom from the disturbing emotions. And that is an undisturbed mind. And this is what we call in Buddhism real happiness. So as long as we haven't found that freedom from disturbing emotions, the happiness which is the pleasant feelings is the only happiness we have, right? So although that happiness can trigger our disturbing emotions, it is still, there is nothing wrong with that pleasantness in itself. So that is happiness, two types of happiness in Buddhism. One that is short-term, the pleasant feelings, and then one that is more lasting, which is the freedom of the disturbing emotions. So then what is suffering? Suffering, what we call suffering, is when we experience unpleasant feelings. And so when unpleasant feelings arise, they're immediately followed by aversion and anger. And aversion and anger are itself suffering. So our attempt, the method that we use to be free of suffering, actually creates suffering. You know, somebody hurts us and we get very upset, and we keep thinking about how we can get rid of that. That thinking about how to get rid of it is suffering in itself. And it is not even that productive. So that suffering, according to Buddhism, is the most coarse form of suffering, and it is called the suffering of pain or the suffering of suffering. And so in Buddhism, there are two more levels of suffering. One is called the suffering of change, and one is called the suffering of conditioned existence. And I think I'm going to continue this afternoon, because it is really important to see clearly the nature of our suffering. You know, that it is more than just experiencing pain. So I'll leave that for this afternoon and let you go to the discussion group. Is that all right? And then I'll look in the meantime to the questions and come back to you in about 10 minutes. And so the questions for the discussion group are: what are the sufferings of life in general? And then I'm thinking about the sufferings that are experienced by everybody. You know, not your personal sufferings, but something that you can see that is part of our humanity. And then the next question is, how do you feel when you indulge in objects that are associated with pleasure or comfort? And why do you do this? What do you try to achieve with that? All right, so I made the questions not too long, so that I hope that you can do that in 10 minutes. Is that all right? Okay, I'll see you after that. We're slowly coming back. I hope it was useful, your discussion. And if you want to share something, feel free to put it in the chat box. And in the meantime, I'll go to one of the questions. Let me see where it is. So there are a few questions about karma, and to have the correct understanding about karma is not so easy. We sometimes understand it too much in this direction or too much in that direction, but to find the middle is very difficult. So we have the tendency to think, well, if it's just people's karma, then we don't have to care about that. You know, it's their karma. But that is going too far. Because it is their karma, they are suffering. And therefore, we need to help where we can. Right? It is not there, they don't deserve to suffer. Sometimes we think, oh, they must have created the causes, so therefore they deserve to suffer. No, nobody deserves to suffer. Suffering is always unpleasant. Suffering beings have, you know, when people start showing actions that are aggressive or that are harmful, the suffering that is going on inside is already so huge. The more we suffer, the more disturbing emotions there are, the more crazy we become, you know, and the only way to become less crazy and is to reconnect with these people, find connection. And what helps us to bring connection is compassion. It's karma, if it's karma, then compassion and kindness, what type of role it will play. You know, so we use karma to think about our own actions and about the own result that we experience. So if I experience a lot of misery in my life, I use karma to think about what have I done and how can I purify that. But when I look outside, the only thing in my mind is, if there is suffering, can I help? You know, that's all. When there is suffering, I want them to be free of suffering. When there is no happiness, I want to give them happiness. All the rest is none of my business. The whole karma story is I'm not going to project that onto the environment, onto sentient beings and say, well, it's just their karma. Of course it is their karma. But if it makes you careless, you know, that's not the right way of using karma. So use it only for yourself, looking into your own mind. And then with respect to others, you use your loving kindness and compassion to be with others. So we do not want to be indifferent, you know, due to thinking about karma. That's not correct. So somebody had a whole suggestion for me to formulate things differently. You know, that in the meditation yesterday, that the way I said was not so skillful and maybe hurtful. So that also depends upon your own perspective, I think. From my side, there is no intention to hurt anyone. From my side, there is only intention to give you some food for thought. So when I say that we are very happy that we have all our physical senses complete, you know, that we can see, that we can hear, there is a comment that maybe people who are blind are going to be unhappy when I say that, you know, but having visual perception is something that we have extra if we compare ourselves with somebody who doesn't have that. But if I don't have any visual perception, then for me personally, I can use that. I can either be in misery because I cannot see, therefore I miss out on so much, or that can become the biggest source of my happiness if I use it in a transformative way. That's up to me. But if I have my sense powers all together, then I compare it with those who don't have it, and I say, well, this makes my life much easier that I have them. And that's also not necessarily true, but in general, we can say that makes my life easier because I can do this and this and this and this. And people who don't have that have trouble doing that. That's not to hurt anyone. That's just how it is. And truth can sometimes be painful, but that's just how it is. But there is no judgment there. And there is also no thinking that if we do not have, I think you send it in the private chat, right? So people cannot read what you sent to me. But if we are lacking something, if we have a handicap, that can be the greatest gift that we could get in life. If we have a lot of negative experiences in life and we use that in a positive way, that can be the biggest gift in your life. I hope that is on, no? If a person is born in a poor place, gets sick, cannot afford an operation and would die, is that bad karma or just bad luck? Whether it's bad or not, it's very difficult to say. There are stories in the Lamrim that some things they can occur in certain conditions. They can appear as something bad, but then things change, conditions change, and suddenly that thing that first was very bad becomes something very good. And there is somewhere a whole story about a father who had 3 sons, and then he was a farmer and he needed the 3 sons to work on the farm. And then one son, he broke his leg and he couldn't help dad to harvest. So dad said, oh, such bad luck that it happened to my son. Now he cannot help me in the farm. And then somehow war broke out and all the healthy boys had to go to the war. And then the farmer thought, oh, how lucky I am that my son broke his leg, because now he doesn't have to go to the war. And so that story keeps going like that things can occur at one point in time as something negative, but then in another point of time, like, oh my gosh, how lucky I am that happened to me. Right? So you cannot say in general, this is bad karma, this is good karma. You need to look at the suffering that it causes in your mind, whether it is bad or good karma, not just on the outer circumstances. So dying is not necessarily negative karma. Dying is part of life, right? But if you are sick and you cannot afford an operation, in general, you would say that is the result of negative karma. And the result of positive karma is that you do find the medicine and that you do find a doctor who can help you. Sometimes I was suffering from conditions for a long time in my life and nobody could tell me what was going on, and so I thought, probably it's just my mind. It's just my mind. I just have to work with my mind. And so I did that. I worked with my mind as much as I could. And then about 6-7 years ago, I met a doctor who says, oh, something is wrong with you, and she could tell me what the problem was. And I think I could meet that doctor at that point in time because I must have purified some of that negative karma. But until that point of time, I wouldn't meet anyone, right? So that karma, I don't have the merits yet to meet a doctor who can help me to overcome the sickness, which is a result of negative karma. So it is never just one thing, you know, there is always a combination of factors going on. And for us, ordinary beings, it is very difficult to really understand the very subtle workings of karma. You know, in Buddhism, we say that is only possible by a Buddha. Only the Buddha has that capacity. Only when we have omniscience, then we have that capacity. So karma triggers a lot, isn't it? I think we should do a course on karma because now there's so many questions. Fear. I'll do one more question and then we'll do the meditation, and I'll see if I can somehow integrate the questions in this afternoon session. So someone says, I have fear from people. I don't feel safe around people. And being in isolation during COVID, I think, made this so clear. When I step out of the house, I'm instantly in fear and tense defensive mode. As a Buddhist, how to work with this, what to purify it. Yes, I'm working with it. So fear, we'll talk more about fear tomorrow when we start talking about self-compassion. Fear is an unpleasant feeling, and fear is a result of having harmed others. So they say, when you harm someone, that instills, or maybe even, you know, you scream at someone, that brings fear into somebody's mind, right? They feel like, oh. Then they say that in your mind there's going to be an imprint which one day can ripen in the same fear that you have instilled in others. So experiencing fear is a result of negative karma, and then you have to say, okay, what can I do with that? Right? So we'll talk about that tomorrow or day after tomorrow, because we all have that, you know. And especially if you look into the situation of the world right now, this is the result of some negative karma that we all have been creating together. And so, of course, then people are going to be afraid. I'll do one more. I find we often waste a lot of time and effort in why did this suffering tragedy happen? How could it happen? An understanding of karma seems to get us past this so that we might jump in directly, roll up our sleeves and start helping to alleviate this suffering. Is that an accurate observation? I think if you have real trust in the law of cause and effect, and you can see that with people who belong to cultures for which that is quite a normal concept, you know, that has been there since, sorry, I always forget to put my mic on, that has been there since the beginning of their life. They seem to get over things much easier, you know. I think especially Tibetans, it's like, it's just karma and the mind doesn't even get upset. But what we do is things happen to us and the mind gets upset. And that being upset is an aversion to the suffering. I do not want to feel this. So we're going to question, why does this happen to me? Why do I feel this? And then we have all reasons why it shouldn't have happened. And I think these are all expressions of our aversion to what happens. And so one way of getting over that aversion is by when karma is something real for you, you know, then there is no need to get so upset. Then it's because you're not going to change what happens to you anyway. Another way of doing that, I think, is to know how to deal with with unpleasant feelings when they arise in the mind. I think we lack a lot of skill in doing that. And that makes that we keep asking these questions that no answer is going to come anyway. So I think we can do with both. Yeah. I hope that answers your question. Yes, I think, Katrina, I agree that if you dismiss other people's suffering, saying it is just their karma, you're generating more negative karma for yourself. It's definitely being careless, and being careless is also a kind of karma. You know, try always to think, how would I want other people to react? How would I want people to react to my suffering? And I know within Buddhism, you know, especially when we are beginners, we say the most horrible things to each other when we are suffering. You know, how are you doing today? Oh, I have so much back pain. Oh, how great, your karma is ripening. I do not want to hear that. You know, I want to hear, I'm so sorry, you are in pain. Can I do something for you? Or just allow me to experience the pain, but don't say, you know, great, wonderful, because suffering is not wonderful. Never. The only person who can say suffering is wonderful is myself. When I'm suffering and I can see that it is somehow wonderful for me, and because I can purify something, but that is coming from me, never from anybody else. Right? Please remember this. This is so important. I always say, when I'm at Tushita teaching, never ever say to anyone, you know, that you deserve it, or, you know, I don't care about you because it's just your karma. That is the totally wrong idea about what karma means. We practice compassion for those who are suffering. We are throwing karma at them as just another way of judgment and another way of justifying your own not caring attitude. You know, that's not going to bring you anywhere. What should I tell that person? Okay, so what I'm going to do in the break, I'm going to read your questions, and then I'll see if I can somehow integrate that in the teaching this afternoon. All right. And think about it, you know. It stirs up a lot. Maybe that's good. Maybe that is... we're going to do a meditation, and I thought about doing a meditation that can help us to recognize how attachment and aversion arises in the mind, and how we can so make yourself comfortable. And if you're sitting on a cushion or in a chair and you can make your back straight, then do that, because that is really the most conducive posture for the meditation. The back straight and at the same time relaxed. Shoulders are relaxed. And bring your awareness to your body. Give yourself some time to connect with your body and be present with the body. And then bring your awareness to your breath by observing the rising and falling of your abdomen every time you breathe in and breathe out. You breathe naturally. And then try to have an open mind during the meditation. An open mind means that we accept whatever arises in the mind. And if we can do that, there is no aversion in the mind. And we have also no expectations of what might come. And if we have an attitude like that, then there is no desires attachment in the mind. When we bring the mind to the present moment, we can see the impermanent nature of things. We can see feelings arising in the mind and dissolving back into the mind. We can observe our mind reacting to the feeling. And if we don't follow this reaction, we can see that the reaction naturally dissolves back into the mind. Being mindful gives us the opportunity to see the transit nature of everything. Everything that arises naturally dissolves again. Feeling arises in every moment of mind. When pleasure arises in the mind, we react with attachment. And that is our attempt to re-experience the pleasant feeling. The way we perceive it is that we think we first need to have attachment in order to experience pleasure. So then when we think, oh, I have to give up my attachment, it sounds like I have to give up pleasure. But that's not true. When we give up attachment, we experience more or more full the pleasure. The nature of attachment is that it cannot give you satisfaction. When we follow attachment, there is always something missing. Or we want more. Or something different. For instance, when we sit, at a certain point we want to stand up. And when we stand up, we want to walk. And then at a certain point, we want to sit again. That is what is following pleasant feelings looks like. There is never contentment. And this is suffering. When a pleasant feeling arises, instead of following it, try to step back and give it some space. And we do this by being mindful, by being in the present moment. Then you will not be carried away by the feeling. You stop clinging to it. When we practice contentment, we accept what is or what we have. And because there is no desire when we practice contentment, there is no dissatisfaction. So this is where peace starts. Then let's have a look at the unpleasant feelings. When unpleasant feelings arise, we react with aversion. And this is our attempt to not experience that unpleasant feeling. That aversion can take form in denial, in ignoring, or suppressing the unpleasant feeling. Or we distract ourselves, indulging in pleasant activities and thinking that we are just trying to relax. By rejecting the unpleasant feelings, they actually become stronger. When we practice mindfulness, we do not want to escape unpleasant feelings. We try to look at them. Mindfulness helps to understand the nature of things. It helps us to see the impermanence of things. And then when things happen, we know to let go. We don't get disturbed when we lose something or when things change. So that mind is relaxed. And the mind that is undisturbed by loss or harm is the mind of patience. When pain or suffering occurs, it becomes quickly huge, because due to the pain, we are so focused upon ourselves. So to counteract that, we can try to think of more suffering. For instance, my suffering is nothing compared to the suffering of others. Because whatever we experience, it's always relative. And the amount depends upon what we compare it with. The moment that we realize what suffering is, peace begins. So peace lays within the knowledge. As soon as we understand, peace comes. As soon as we understand we are afraid or worried, we accept it. And when we accept it, it doesn't become bigger. So then recall which contemplation from this meditation was most helpful to you. And use that to bring the meditation to a conclusion. And then we can conclude the meditation and also the session by dedicating all the positive energy that we have created by listening, contemplating, reflecting, discussing, meditating to the happiness and the well-being of all sentient beings. Thank you very much. I hope you have a pleasant afternoon, morning, evening, not sure where you are, and that I see you in 4 hours at 5 o'clock Indian time.